Hello, hello. Good evening, everybody. Hope we're coming in clear. Let's make sure we're coming in through clear. All right. Looks like we're coming in clear. Everything looking good. Let me just pull up the chats. I hope everybody's doing excellent. Definitely many things taking place, going on. So much of what we spoke of last time already kind of being seen, also occurring. We had to come to you guys with the next one. Definitely, at least we're gonna be doing a weekly update, if not maybe bi-weekly. But right now, from what we got, it looks like maybe we might be coming bi-weekly because so much coming on. I do have some information today, but I don't think we're gonna have enough time to be able to go over it all. But I did pick out some of the best stuff, definitely related to the subjects we've been speaking on and what's been going on. Looking how kind of old ways of ruling and trying to empower or overpower or subjugate individuals no longer is the way that we're seeming to be going into the future. They're definitely trying to try new tactics that we're going to be speaking on and talking about as we've spoken on before. I mean, we're excited to talk to you guys about some of this information. It is information that if anybody's ever ran into me publicly or anywhere, already knows how I like to talk and communicate and the subjects I like to stick around. And that's kind of what we'll be talking about today. Today's topic. We'll wait a little bit before make sure anybody else want to be coming in. We'll give them a few minutes. As you do see, we did choose a cover here. The cover is definitely going over several things that we'll be covering today. A couple of those things which you do see there in the back are the tepuis. The tepuis are these tall, flat mountain plateaus that have the dates of being some of the oldest rock formations in the world, dating back to, I believe it was 1 to 2 billion years old. Seeing how the Earth is around 4 billion years old, it is some of the oldest rock formations, and these rock formations are huge mountains, if you would. And on top of being like these tall mountains, it's actually one of the areas of the tallest waterfall in the world. I believe it's called the Angel's Waterfall. They're also flat on top, and because they're so high up and so flat, they actually have their own ecosystem, and they're like islands in the world. So they're actually unique areas in the world, as long as that they have specific anomalies. You also see some of the lightning, which is one of the interesting anomalies that does take place in Venezuela. It's got the place and the world record for the largest amounts of lightning I guess strikes and lightning shows in the world. And I believe it's like around 260 days out of the year there's actually lightning. And along with some of that, we'll be talking about Greenland and the different anomalies in Greenland taking place. There was also a Russian submarine that was seen, and it was I guess chasing, which you would not guess, right? But it was seen chasing this oil tanker that was on its way in the Pacific that the U.S. ended up capturing, which I believe we spoke on also last time. So we're also showing some of that information. As you're seeing different world powers kind of crossing their red lines, or the lines of boundaries, kind of challenging each other. And so those are some of the things we'll be speaking on. We'll go ahead and start moving in with the presentation. Like we were talking about, were the tepuis. And as you can see here are many of the different types of tepuis. Right there you can see some of the waterfalls on the right hand side and the left hand side. As we said, these are some of the oldest rock formations in the world. The indigenous people from the area, I believe is the Pomona are the ones that actually take you to go visit these sacred areas, and they're very sacred to them. There's some that they do get on top and climb as initiation rites, and also as to be able to go do specific traditional, and also to go visit ancient sites that they say have been there even before they know. So it dates back to even the time before their um, oral tradition, which is usually around 20 to 30 generations back. Um, as well as the Tepuis are an area where a lot of anomalies are seen: orbs, UFOs, entities, aliens. We'll be talking. We'll be seeing an excerpt of an individual that will be speaking on this. He's a Venezuelan. He has been going to these areas. Now, the Tepuis is an area that I was already investigating prior to any of this taking place, but because I'm just really into nature, I always love watching nature documentaries, new documentaries dealing with nature, new area they're exploring. And these Tepuis actually had been a big talk the last couple of years, because they had done a couple of different expeditions to these areas, and also finding specific amphibian and flora. And that's the interesting part too, again talking about frogs and how they made it up to these areas. Now, some do theorize, and it is something that is spoken about, is about ancient diluvian effects or events taking place that brought about higher levels of water rise, that then might have led to different animals being trapped in higher levels of elevation. It's one of the interesting things when we deal with the Lake Titicaca, and Lake Titicaca being the highest elevation of lake that exists, and not that exists that we know of, and in that lake it actually has seahorse, a freshwater seahorse. And that's the interesting part: how did a seahorse end up in Lake Titicaca if it's not really connected to the ocean? But this goes back to, again, the same thing as we were talking about the ancient floods, and also ancient stories of the indigenous speaking of when the waters fell from the heavens, which is what we also interpret as in the biblical text as the flood that ended up destroying many of the ancient beings that were, we would call like Nephilim, or the fallen ones, that were like the mixed with the humans. And then there was also the giants. So it was basically to be able to create a division, and also to create a separation and a purification of what was taking place on earth. And it seems mainly now the expression that we mainly see is of humans, but that is part of what we'll be speaking on, and what we're talking about with the Tepuis and the indigenous people, on how they have seen beings and other entities, and they speak about it. It's not something they speak of so openly, because indigenous people tend to be more private with the way that they do things. But at the end of the day, it is something that has come out from different people that have visited the areas and have spoken with them, as well as different anomalies that have also been recently been spotted and seen in Venezuela, UFOs and many different aircrafts, even before the capturing of Maduro and his wife. We'll also be seeing here, as we were talking about, were the Tepuis. There's also one of the reasons NASA comes up a lot on this is because NASA is interested in these areas now, because since they're kind of looked at as lost worlds or like alien life, because they're not similar to everything else that's going on at the surface level. These Tepuis are been evolving in their own ecosystems and environments. They're like islands in the sky, if you would. For billions of years. So to NASA, it's something that's very interesting to go investigate and see, to be able to learn how to go deal with different topography or ecology when they go, or when we decide to go travel about the solar system, let alone the cosmos or other areas in the galaxy. Now, there are some interesting anomalies which we'll be showing on, also to give relevance to what we're speaking on, which is one of the interesting things also now, seeing how we're owners of Venezuela, because there's several different anomalies that the indigenous people speak on, which is that the Tepuis are also kind of cavernous, because when you look, there's also these giant like cenotes that go into the Tepuis, which then in themselves also create like their own ecosystems in life. But then dealing with the esoteric and the ancient traditions, or what some would say mythology, but mythology could be basically the cutting edge of religion, if you would. That there was many underground accesses, because it's considered that the Americas is kind of like honeycombed or riddled with many cavernous areas underneath, which is very apparent when we go into like the Yucatan area because we can see the accesses through the cenotes and even the underwater ocean water that's found deep inland in the Yucatan, because the ocean water is going underneath the cavernous areas of the state or the country, which then deals with how there was salt water, because they're in the lakes of Mexico where they end up building Teotihuacan. There was actually 4 different types of water, and one of the waters was saline or had salt in it. So it's interesting how we end up with salt water that far in. But as we're talking about, as we start digging and you start doing research, you'll see that it's very cavernous. So these cavernous systems were basically accessed. So in the exopolitics side of things, they are saying that there was a lot of, as we were saying, UFO activity taking place in Venezuela. Actually, is kind of like a bit of a hotspot, along with Cuba, because as we even go further back as dealing with Atlantis and that Bimini Caribbean area, we're talking about an ancient hub of land that existed prior to the waters falling from the heavens, or what ended up taking place that caused the floods or caused what we would as Atlantis or even prior Lemuria to have not been existent no more, but some of those remnants still exist, and that's what apparently seems to be an access points in these tepuis to underground cavernous systems that then tie into other cavernous systems that were being used by ancient indigenous people, but also specifically it said that it was being used by more advanced beings, or as what indigenous people are misinterpreted as saying as the gods. But I think that's really just another term that they were using because they were just subscribing them something of beings that were more capable than they were. So they were giving them a title that we now would translate to mean God. But obviously it was their way of trying to communicate in a time where it was probably something even more bizarre because of the lack of evidence, and even speaking with other cultures, even though they probably were even doing these things, but again, as we're led to believe. So again, a big part of the UFO, as we're seeing the phenomena of Bolivia, Brazil, Colombia, and we'll get into some of these other ones, as there had been a lot of recent events taking place, and I believe in Colombia and Peru and those areas, dealing with entities that they were calling the pelacaras, which are entities that were basically doing things to humans that did not seem like they were animals or were being inflicted by humans, because the evidence that was being left afterwards, after these beings having been manipulated or really I don't want to say tortured because we don't really know, but it seems like they were being put through very gruesome operations, and these operations were leaving no blood. They were basically almost equivalent to what we see with cattle mutilations and animal mutilations taking parts in Americas, and also they take parts in South America. But now this was specific because it was dealing with humans, as well as with different sightings that have been recently being seen throughout the area. So now, as we're speaking on with the Venezuela being riddled, when NASA seems to go over these sites, which is part of the reason also it was anomalous, was they weren't being able to see deeper into these areas that were basically obstructing the satellite view from NASA to be able to see these areas. So this was already becoming like a hotspot to people, to studious, to educated, to curious, to investigative, to people even looking to make money, because that's one of the big things also dealing with when we talk about the oil and the type of oil that's found in Venezuela. As we're talking about some of the oldest land on earth, right? So it is said that there is a sentient black goo-like oil that exists, that's sentient to Earth, and that it is part of Earth's consciousness. But then there's also an alien version of this as well that supposedly hijacked and came to Earth, which is part of the reason we're also talking about this Bimini area and these different things, because this is part of supposedly probably had an effect on bringing about the waters that fell from the heavens or the floods. This is part of a theoretical aspect of what would have caused the floods to happen, a meteorite or something hitting the Earth. Now, part of that theory is also that meteorite could have been an alien ship, or even alien goo, or alien sentient nanotechnology, that's more evolved than maybe things that we know of, because as we know, there are reports of by exopolitics of submarines and different different countries that were in the 90s have heard or reported to have been in the Gulf over an event. There was an oil spill, but what was interesting is that so many gatherings of submarines in that area that did not make sense to what was being said was just oil. And as we start doing more report, it seemed to be related to what also was being found in the Falklands, and even dealing with ancient esoteric knowledge of dark stones that were being used to worship and bring about entities that were manifesting, that were kind of being tied to interdimensionals or aliens or archons, this type of talk. So the Falcons and this Gulf incident dealing with the black goo, and this black goo, as we will see right now, I'll play a quick video to talk a little more on that. And again, dealing with the ships that were, here we go, no, one more, here we go. The ships that were being found in Greenland, because it says part of a ship that crash landed in Greenland actually sends off anomalies in the magnetic north. So that's one of the ways that some found it. And as we see, indigenous people had been at the bottom left using these alien meteoritic stones to be able to use for spears or different things, and using the metals and the metallurgy out of it. Going back into how some of this also came back to these black stones being worshipped, and then by being worshipped, or sometimes it's even said sacrificed humans or entities or beings or living things to it, it would cause it to kind of create an energetic flux where it would then bring about the entity to kind of be able to be seen in our dimensional field or in our realm. And this is part of the reason, again, going back into why the black goo was essentially being sought after so much in the Falklands and in the Gulf Coast, because supposedly this black goo had the ability to be able to link or marry with technology. And at the same time, as we will see in the report, it was being used as a way to alter or to infuse or to hybridize with humanity. And the interesting part about this is, and we'll do more reports into and give you details into this further, but you could always look them up yourself. They went down to the Falklands, and in the Falklands, that's what then they ended up seeing in the Falklands, that there was all these different tech guys that were invited to come and do investigation in the Falklands. If you look into Falklands, it's a very small island. They got into war with Argentina, lasted several days. But one of the interesting things is that they supposedly ended up finding UFOs that were mining this black goo, this sentient AI, you could say resource, if you would. Which would make sense as we would get into other things. So then these as we know, our government, and not just our government, but even the military industrial complex loves acquiring alien technology and UFO technology, USO technology, interdimensional technology, ancient technology, because they know that there's something there, and they believe that any tool that they could use to be able to benefit, well, they're going to put into their hands to be able to help them secure their power and their ability to be able to affect the people and manipulate them in any way that they would choose to. So one of the interesting points dealing with because a big part of also a lot of things taking place right now, we're going to see also kind of has, like we would say, a double-edged sword or a mirror effect. So as much as they're doing bad, there are some good aspects to what's being done, because again, when the ancient mound builders, the original Masonic elders that are the mound or the pyramid seal in the back of the dollar decided to initiate the European brothers, which some already having knowledge dealing with these esoterics and Gnostic and Templar traditions, which they preserved themselves, being initiated into the ancient mound building society, secret society of the Americas. They were given the torch to be able to preserve certain knowledge and to be able to keep that afloat, because this deals with more deeper aspects of esoteric knowledge. So it is said on a certain aspect that what they're doing is basically joining up Turtle Island back to be its full sovereign state, nation, country, including England. And then, as you can see here, with the interesting part, it deals also with what we've already had spoken on before with the North American technate, being, as we can see, the turtle kind of trying to come out of the water, and it's sideways, partially one side up and one side down, as you can see here better. And so what is said is that basically they're acquiring Greenland because it's part of it. But if we do see that there's a cavernous network and the ancient ancestors, and how a big part of this also deals with Greenland, as they would say, with the resources and the greater war that would be taking place, as we had spoken on this before, because this is going back to reports of 2020 where World War III could be fought in the Arctic. And we're already talking about they were preparing and doing drills in this area, because again, it's also strategic, like they say, for America to get Greenland, because a big part of the shipping lanes and many of the things that will be taking place as the Arctic frees up from ice is going to be moving to the north, and this is going to be a very important circle for trade and again for fresh water. But not only for that, if we deal with the esoteric aspects and even dealing with Admiral Byrd, which we had some images which we'll put on up a bit later, how Admiral Byrd as well noticed and saw that there was something going on in the Arctic. And it also goes into many of the reports taking place lately about ships and different UFO. And as we were saying, many of the military industrial complexes, which are wealthier than countries and have technologies beyond what country militaries have, because that's who sells the military their technology, are busy wanting to acquire this technology. And right here we'll see a little bit of quick video talking about why these technologies are so important.
These military guys have been fooled or guided by the intelligence community. It's easy to see how this looks in reality. There was one admiral of the US Navy who was asked by the CIA to assist spraying, and he said no. And one day later, he was found shot with 2 bullets in his chest, and they said it's suicide. I want to see a guy committing suicide with 2 bullets in his own chest. Yeah. This is a clear language. The next one that was in charge of this position said yes. Since then, the US Navy is taking part in the spraying programs. So this is the second agenda behind is intelligence community. And this is a little bit more complicated. In this agenda, you take the energy, and it is kind of collected by the piezoelectric crystals also within the body. You have a shifting in frequency, up converting the microwave to biodigestible light, sending this light into the DNA, reading out the information of the DNA, and then it is processed by the Morgellons and collected by the technology of the intelligence community to read out our state of mind, and by reinserting it onto the heart technology, they can also insert patterns of the same quality. So they just grab it here and start back from the beginning to control our consciousness. This is the second agenda, the second thing. The next one is we had a black goo in the rain as well. Now what does the black goo do? The black goo is processing light as well, but it is processing it in the bidirectional form. So it is controlling consciousness and subconsciousness. This is what forming our way we receive, we look at reality. So the subconsciousness is a time reverse component of a bidirectional signal. So it's doing basically the same as the intelligence community, but it's taking another step to the black goo. And the black goo is connected to quantum computers based on black goo. We found 4 of them. One was in Rome, one was in the city of London, one was in an NS underground facility in the middle.
So, so as we could see right there, we can see right there on how Harold Kaltzavella is talking to us about black goo. And as we were talking about the black goo is something that's being found uh, in in Greenland. It's being found in Venezuela. It's one of the big reasons why Haiti is sitting on what we would say a gold mine of lithium and many different types of ancient components. This gets into part of the knowledge of what we would see again, because it's always co-referenced or also mentioned, if you would, on movies, because as we know, movies is a way also that they use for programming, as they say, or is talked about in cinema psychology, which is a way that they use to be able to soft disclose and as well be able to inform the people, but not really inform the people. Speak to your subconscious, but not speak to your conscious. So then it helps them in their potential to be able to manifest and create things when we start understanding how that works on a fundamental level, which we'll speak on in future episodes, but we have spoken a bit on it before and deals with the works of Dan Winter and others. So again, as we were saying, the mining of this, dealing with a movie specifically of like Black Panther and Wakanda, with the Vibranium, and specifically with Wakanda Part 2, when we start seeing again that underwater world, which is again what we're talking about when we start looking into USOs and all these cavernous entryways we were talking about into the Americas, into the Caribbean area, and all the areas that line the Caribbean area. So as we start looking into that, we see one of the things that was being found again when this meteorite that crash landed, as they show in Wakanda, similar thing took place, because Wakanda is actually loosely, or the movie is actually, and that they ended up getting sued for this, is based on African legends based out of Africa. Prince Michael, you can look him up on YouTube. We'll do another report on that in the future as well, because we're going to have to come back to some of these subjects to be able to describe them a little more, and I'm sure there'll be other things taking place. It even goes into the places that have been recently being bombed and stuff. But Prince Michael speaking on how that legend ended up being stolen or not copywritten, but plagiarized by Disney, similar like to The Matrix, and were sued for it because that's actually part of an ancient legend dealing with the African Brotherhood, or the Kemishan Tameri brothers, the Magi, the initiates that have the oral tradition to talk about this. And when we find the evidence now, again, not now, but now people believe it more like Thomas's, the evidence shows us that there is much ancient meteoric debris found in the Caribbean, and one big chunk in Haiti. And as we're speaking of specifically dealing with the Arctic and Greenland, there's a big chunk of it also in Greenland. It is also theorized that Antarctica is part of, or is Atlantis, and that when the meteorite hits, it actually dislodged it and moved it, or when the waters came, this also had an effect. There are a couple of theories into this which we could discuss further in other events. And as we were seeing here, as we were talking about why we're going and bombing all these specific areas, Somalia, Yemen, Syria, Nigeria, Iran, Gaza, Iraq, and now we're targeting Colombia, Cuba, Greenland, and Mexico. We don't have Venezuela up there, but that's the recent one. Again, we're speaking specifically on what they're telling us geopolitically. But one of my big things, as I always like to say, is that as much as they seem like, oh, we're reading what they're doing, I guarantee you there's a part of the aspects of the secrecy, because they've been learning. And even though we've been able to telegraph moves better, they're still not fools. They like to, I believe, appear like fools, but in reality they are up to things to get a specific outcome and goal. And their main goal is to again push the people into specific polarities to be able to play on those emotional extremes and keep the people ping-ponging back and forth. So it's definitely important to keep a calm and conscious mind. And as we can see here, White House Deputy Chief Staff Stephen Miller, Greenland should be part of the USA, and nobody will dare fight America over the country's future. And this is a big part of where they double down, because they also understand, be it that it's a part of, again, going back to the aspect of Turtle Island that needs to belong, but even in the aspect of that they know that individuals won't protest, because they understand a big part, or a big hub of the wheel is America and Al Maghreb, and the people of the Americas, the consciousness of America, and the plight for what we would say as what they see it, because they have a lot of fear based on the whole racial paradigm that they've created for themselves of being exterminated or being eliminated. So a big part, it seems like they fear that they must act aggressively and lash out at the public and anybody that is against them. But anybody that has any sense of morality or intelligence or diplomacy understands that dialogue and meeting individuals halfway is a big part of creating bridges and building treaties, and actually having a foundation of what we would say, again, what is respected in the world, international law, and the philosophy that has helped develop that international law. Now, we won't say that international law is sound and just all the time, but the thing is that we still have to preserve that semblance, because there's a large percentage of that ability to be able to provide protection, safety, and correction for things by respecting and acknowledging the philosophies that stand up for it. So when we see governments and presidents not acknowledging and not respecting these things, it does shake up the foundation for this understanding. But again, as I like to say, you will only be conquered or ruled by the things that you use to try to rule and conquer others. So when force and tactics of espionage and infiltration and abduction and kidnapping are used, then more than likely that is something that could be used against oneself. And now we can rely on, okay, well, we have the largest stick and the biggest guns and the best weapons. But again, that is not a good philosophy or moral to have, because the sun always sets and the stars do come out. So nothing has its time in absoluteness. And if it does, then it just finished mimicking all of creation. So as we can see that now has not taken place. So there's no absolutes to anything of what we should be doing. So we should move more with the sense of that diplomacy and cohesion of humanity coming together. So as we can see here, that's one of the big things. Again, famous words of Wesley Clark: we're going to be in 7 countries in 5 years: Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and Iran. And then where do we look at the top with all of them being bombed? The interesting parts with Yemen and Somalia, you're also dealing with a lot of interesting anomalies taking place in those areas. But then there's also the strategic pass that's trying to be secured prior to the Suez Canal, so that then that could be used as a way to be able to create bargaining, or to use as a way to be able to use it as a hammer on the people. Either way, as we can see from the batting average of the rulers of or the leaders of the world, it's never in the favor of humanity or the benefit of humanity. And that's what we focus on here more, is we focus on humanity come together, trying to start moving forward, not stagnate, trying to create the world that we all see cohesively being a better world for not just ourselves, but the children, and the cohesive coming together, the family in the future. And as we were talking already about the UFO crash landing that took place millions of years, we also wanted to read the headline that the U.S. recovered non-human biologics from UFO crash sites, former intel officials say. So as we can see already here, the government's starting to emit much, as we said, is going to be coming out this year. And as we can see here, UFO experts discover alien craft that crash landed millions of years ago in Greenland. And again, this is part of what we were talking about, the Amazon and Greenland connection. But again, as we've been saying, the world has been displaced a bit, is part of what Plato spoke about when they spoke about the Atlantic basically being muddy and nobody being able to sail it, which was a big part of supposedly Atlantis falling. And a big part of that also said is that Atlantis didn't sink so long ago as we're told or made to believe. And a big part of, we also want to make mention, kind of correlating and tying to this, is the aspects of 3AI Atlas and how it's been causing so much anomalous and ruckus in the scientific community, and so many things that it's recently been doing that has also been witnessed and seen on Earth as signs or events, as dealing with the Hopi traditions and other traditions. Oh, give me a minute. Let's see where the rest of the presentation is. Oh, okay. Okay. So now we'll get into this next video right here, which we were talking about with the pelacaras, which is a big part of it.
¿Qué son los peladores de cara? En 2023, hubo una serie de videos que se volvieron virales. Estos videos fueron grabados en la Amazonía peruana. Una escena caótica en la que los aldeanos corrían gritando, "Nos están atacando extraterrestres", y usaban el término pelata, que significa pelador de cara. Tuve que ir allí para investigar un incidente en particular, que fue el intento de secuestro de una niña de 15 años. Me contó que una tarde estaba en su patio trasero y se agachó para recoger la fruta. Sintió un viento en la espalda y levantó la vista para ver qué generaba ese viento, y vio a una persona vestida con una armadura negra volando en un disco que aterrizó a su lado y la agarró por detrás. Le tapó la boca con la mano, otro aterrizó frente a ella y le agarró las piernas. Sacaron un tubo largo que tenía una crema y el tipo que le sujetaba la boca por detrás empezó a untarle la crema por toda la cara, y mientras lo hacía, el tipo que estaba delante le dijo, ten cuidado, no te pongas demasiado porque vas a estropear la carne". Después de aplicarle esta sustancia en la cara, sacaron un bisturí láser y empezaron a hacerle una incisión debajo de la mandíbula, y ella empezó a forcejear, y cuando empezaron a cortar, empezó a asustarse y metió la mano debajo del casco del tipo que estaba detrás y empezó a levantarse del casco. Él se agitó, se asustó un poco y la soltaron. Ella soltó un grito espeluznante. Su hermano y un grupo de aldeanos llegaron corriendo al instante. Italia, antes de desmayarse, dijo que el assailant dijo, vamos, tenemos que salir de aquí, y entonces uno de ellos dijo, no podemos dejarla sola. ¿Qué son los peladores de cara? En 2023, hubo una serie de videos que se volvieron virales. Estos videos fueron grabados en la Amazonía peruana.
So right there we're seeing, just to translate a bit, even though there was subtitles, this is Alberino. He's talking to us about investigation. He actually lives in South America. He deals a lot with the ancient sites and ancient discoveries. There's some interesting points to this Pelacara story, because as she was saying, when he removes the helmet, he actually removes the helmet off the beans, one of the beans. And the interesting part is that some of the beings that were being experienced weren't being said to alien, but some of them were also being said to be kind of military personnel. But the interesting part of these military personnel is that they were riding ships and using technology that was very unknown, and the way they were moving through the forest and kind of flying about made it seem very interesting. Now, going back into one of the interesting parts while we're also going into this area, because again, it is one of the big things that governments have long used, the tactics of fear to intimidate other militaries. So it wouldn't be surprising that UFO military industrial complex using top secret anti-gravity technology, or technology that would appear so, could also be posing and guising themselves and causing, if you would, over-the-top pranks on the people to be able to cause a fear or a hysteria that would bring about a certain effect. Now, it is interesting, this could also be being done to be able to create a certain security fence around maybe certain operations or things taking place in the area. Either way, it is interesting how the government, or if you would, the US, is moving into these areas potentially to secure the areas. But either way, one of the big things that we believe in this channel is that people should have a right to be able to stand up for themselves, represent themselves in government, to learn civic and stand up for their sovereign selves, and definitely represent their own government. So we don't believe in other governments coming and taking other people's leaders. We believe in the people themselves changing these leaders through their own insight and awareness. Now, when they are oppressive regimes and different things like this, definitely each situation requires its comprehension. But when it is nothing that is any different than any other governments are doing, it is interesting why this approach is being taken, which is again why we're getting into some of these different topics and news that brings about or gives us a little more awareness on why this could be taking place. Now, one of the interesting stories behind Roswell's that has come across is that one of the theories was that this was really Japanese alien technology, not alien technology, but alien to us, understanding how the Japanese society and culture was actually founded, if you would, or even one of their deities is a woman, Amaterasu, which ended up, I believe, falls from the heavens in a ship. And even the Japanese prime minister, I believe we've listed it before as well here on the show, has shown and talked about UFOs and aliens. So one of the understanding was that Roswell was essentially a Japanese anti-gravity technology that was being piloted by some extremely short Japanese elite military that supposedly went to the extreme as also removing their one of their fingers to be able to appear like they had 4 fingers. Now, this is going back into what we're saying with the pelacaras and other things in militaries using the angle of aliens or UFOs to be able to cause a certain intimidation quality on the people, to be able to cause fear, and also use that angle as another means to be able to impose domination without even having the real, if you would, technology or alien extraterrestrial means to do really what it is. But the fear and the thought of it in itself would make people run or act unhumanely. And that's one of the big things dealing here with the pelacaras and stuff, that it was something that was taking place. Now, as we said, there was also aliens and other entities that were spotted, not just individuals with if you would, masks. So now we're going to go into watching another video real quick, which we were talking about dealing with the Tepuis and the Tepuis, because we were just talking about the South America area. We were just talking about Peru, and I believe it was also being happening in Colombia. Well, in Venezuela, we also see that we were seeing that there's these portals or these doors there, as we're going to hear the brother here. You guys can go check out his channel. I do recommend it. He has some great stories. But this is, again, like I said, dealing more with the research I was doing already in Tepuis and stuff previously.
Las puertas esas de energía, o las puertas astrales esas no se dan en todo el Roraima. Hay solo ciertos puntos donde se dan en el Roraima esas puertas, ¿vale? Ciertos puntos donde se ven en el Roraima, ¿ok? Es un sector del Roraima que tiene una conexión. Dicen mi amigo Marrero, que para descanse, decía que ¿cómo se llama? Que era donde estaba el disco solar del Roraima. Me decía que había varios discos solares en Sudamérica que existen, que es la única parte en el mundo donde existen unos 8 o 9 discos solares. Bueno, discos solares yo veo que es como si fuera un centro de energía, de poder o de puerta universal. Yo no sé cómo describirlo porque yo no creo mucho en eso, pero bueno, él me decía que había 8 o 9 puertas solares en América, dos importantes estaban en Roraima, 2 muy importantes estaban en Roraima, una estaba en Perú, y así estaba regado por toda Sudamérica, ¿vale? En el Machu Picchu, cerca del Machu Picchu, por ahí había otra, ¿vale? Entonces, ¿cómo se llama? Ahí en la cueva esa famosa, no sé, creo que la cueva de los Tallos o algo así se llama en Perú, que ¿cómo se llama? Que también había otra. Bueno, estaban regadas por ahí. Él me decía que en el Roraima había 2 puertos. El Roraima era muy importante para los seres extraterrestres, pues, que venían a nuestro, no sé si pasaban a nuestra dimensión desde otra dimensión o venían de otro planeta, ¿vale? De hecho, a lo mejor el hecho del transporte que traían, esas naves que se transportaban, era como pasar de un plano a otro. Nosotros lo vemos, venían a lo mejor de otro planeta, pero es como si pasaran de una dimensión a otra, porque es una puerta astral que aparece. Bueno, no sé cómo describirlo, no sé, yo no sé cómo describirlo, yo sé lo que viví yo, ¿vale? Lo que yo vi, pero no sé cómo describírselo, pero sí es un fenómeno muy extraño. Y no es dicho por mí, porque lo viví yo, dicho por mí, por los indígenas, por grandes exploradores que han hecho los exploradores que descubrieron la cueva de cristal, que vamos a hablar más adelante de ella, ¿ok? Esa cueva de cristal que descubrieron los exploradores, le voy a decir una cosa, es algo que ellos vivieron algo muy fantástico, increíble. Decían que realmente era algo que era como si fuera la casa de unos seres extraños, de unos seres con unos jeroglíficos y uno que lo van a ver. Es más, le voy a poner la fotografía ahora para que la vean de los jeroglíficos, ese es del Roraima, que los indígenas dicen que ellos no han hecho ni sus ancestros han hecho, que ellos lo encontraron ahí hecho, que no se sabe quién lo ha hecho, qué cultura lo ha hecho, ¿vale? Y entonces, ¿cómo se llama? Son unas puertas, son unos jeroglíficos, y en las entradas de la cueva, ¿vale? Uno tiene que entrar como si fuera un ocelote hacia abajo, y después se abre la cueva hacia adentro, y en la entrada hay unos símbolos muy extraños también, ¿sabes? Hay unos símbolos muy extraños hechos realmente, no son naturales, son símbolos como tallados en la roca, ¿vale? De hecho, una roca de cuarzo que es bastante dura, esa roca, bastante dura, es bastante fuerte y es tallada, pues se talló allí, ¿vale? ¿Cómo se llama? Yo le voy a decir una cosa, mira.
So right here, he's talking about, just to translate real quick, are about a bunch of portal sites that he's experienced having gone to these areas with the indigenous people that he goes and experiences the Tepuis. He's been going to those areas for, I believe he says, around 30, 40 years, but he never really decided to really like catalog or keep the information about all these encounters and stuff until recently, when he started then realizing the importance of this information and how many people were actually interested. And that's what he speaks on, that there's some portals and some doors that are seen at these tepuis, because again, it being a sacred site, again, going back into controlling these areas, as we can see, these are important sites we have in the world, but here in Venezuela, right here where the tepuis are, we can see that there is a node there, and it is important. I mean, different maps have different nodes, and in the Costa Dodeca, and there's several different types of ley lines, and there's really strong ones. But it's considered that there in that specific area, there are some very, very strong Masonic ley lines. And here's that Bimini area, dealing with Casey, and then we'll talk about an ancient site of Atlantis and its connection to these areas. Now, real quick, give me a minute. I just want to see. Right here, we're going to see the Costa Dodeca. And we're going to see, talking about these energy nodes real quick. Give me a minute.
Have you ever wondered why you've been attracted to certain places in the world, or have you visited a place many times and you don't know why? Well, it just happens that there is a certain geometry all around the Earth. We call it the Earth grid, and there's actually a geometry that encompasses the whole planet. Well, today I'm with Dan Shaw from Oregon, and he's known as the Vortex Detective. He spent his whole life researching all these areas and actually visiting them and understanding why the energy there is amplified, and it's all based on sacred geometry. He calls it magnetoreceptors, that in our brain we have a metal called magnetite, and magnetite is magnetic, and it allows us to be attracted to certain places that are highly magnetic on the planet. We're going to discuss certain things like, why has the prime meridian, grid point 1, that's the Cheops pyramid in Giza, why has it shifted 31 degrees, say, to Greenwich? Who decided that the prime meridian is at Greenwich now in the UK and not originally Pyramid? Or could it be that we in our higher consciousness are our own prime meridian and we follow energy intuitively? I have a 50-minute YouTube interview with Dan, and we're going to follow the breadcrumbs. Have you ever wondered?
So right there, like we were saying, Jane was talking to us about that information about those portals. Oh, here we go. Here's that map. Here, let me pull it up real quick. This is what I wanted to show you guys, dealing with the map, because there's a big debate on the Earth.
I'd like to introduce to you a really special model
Shape
known as the Earth Star, and it's a map of the world, as you can see. It's a map of the world showing all the sacred sites on the planet, and they exist on what we call nodal points. This was a very sacred shape according to Buckminster Fuller, and even 2200 years ago we had Plato. Plato was saying that if you want to think of the world, think of it as a sphere that's been sewn with 12 skins. And here, if we look closely, this is similar to the 12 skins, but it's called a rhombic triacontohedron. It's exactly this shape here, but it's made up of 30 diamonds. And the reason why this is important is that it's all based on the golden ratio. So I'll put that one down. So it's got 60 faces, 62 edges, 30 diamond faces. Now we're going to zoom in onto Australia here. If you look at this diamond here, that's called a golden diamond because the distance from there to there in Fibonacci numbers, if this was 13, the long axis, this is called 8. The ratio of 8 to 13 is approximately 1.618, the golden ratio. And if you look at the center of that diamond, we have in Australia a very sacred place called Grid Point 44. We call it Wilpena Pound. It's our sacred site that's very close to Uluru, the giant red rock, which is above that nodal point. So we all know that one here. If we turn it around, the main one that the whole world knows is called Grid Point 1. So here we see Egypt in this golden diamond. And if we had to measure it, the distance of that long axis is 2,200 miles, and it would be balanced by the shorter axis of 1,400 miles. So Grid Point 1 was the center of the ancient Atlantean model. I'll just give you one more point. There's lots of points, but if we turn this around here, just one more point, you'll see that this is that sharp point there is called the Bermuda Triangle. There's been a lot of mysteries and boats missing.
I just wanted to pause it here real quick. I want you to look where, remember he just told us this is a golden diamond because of the way and the ratios and the proportions. But I want you to look right where that golden diamond crosses, right in the middle. That's that area where the Tepuis are at. That's the part that's interesting as well, dealing as where we're going. And again, us going back to we're playing chess. Why are we securing this area? Why not Colombia first? Why not Mexico first? Why not one of these other? Again, as we were saying, these areas are more strategically important, it seems like, at the moment for things that they got going on, and specific probably exopolitics that we're not being really versed on, but we can pick up on the context clues and what's taking place. But let's let Jane 108 finish here.
Called the Bermuda Triangle. There's been a lot of mysteries and boats missing and sightings happening at this intersection of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. At the center of this pentagonal geometry, there's been huge magnetic aberrations and hexagonal intersection of 1, 2.
Now I just wanted to pause right here. This is the interesting part, because now when we're looking at the North American technate, we can see that it's basically composed of these 5 golden diamonds, and they basically form like this flower, if you would. I can kind of perceive, if you would, a 5-pointed star or pentagram. It's just an interesting connection, correlation I wanted to tell you guys.
3, 4, 5. At the center of this pentagonal geometry, there's been huge magnetic aberrations and tectonic plates that have been shifting. So scientists love geometry because it helps us to map the Earth. And by mapping the Earth, we realize that the Earth is a fractal of who we are, and the Earth is a fractal of the sun and the greater cosmos. So by understanding the measurement of the Earth, which is what geometry means, geo is the Earth and metry means to measure. So when we measure the Earth, we're really understanding the very fabric of who we are.
Oh, Nassim Harim. We'll get into him at another point. But I wanted to show you guys that on Jane 108 because, again, it gets into the big debate that takes place a lot today between the Earth being flat or it being round. And I think there's still a small part to this which is not being stated, which gets into the toroidal aspect of it, and that gets into more of the electrical geometry, or if you would, the way that energy is created and harnessed and harvested by Earth. I just wanted to show again, as we were talking about those specific areas and those nodes dealing with the subject that we're speaking of today, as far as with Venezuela at the moment and the Amazon connection. And as we were talking where Holtzvela, dealing with the aspects of Greenland. Now, one of the big things we wanted to talk about is one of the things that isn't mentioned a lot of the time, which is the indigenous, or if you would, the more melanated UFOs. We always hear about the gray UFOs and even other color UFOs and white tall Nordics and blue-eyed. And I'm the type of individual, if there's aliens and the creator's out there making them, I'm pretty sure he's not being uptight with the way he expresses or the way in which he chooses to physically compose them or add their hue to them. So I'm not surprised to hear or learn about, which we've been knowing about, but more recent stories of things like this taking place. And right here, we're going to hear a quick story. And this is coming from Dr. Wesley Muhammad talking to us about this information, right? And we always want to be hearing both sides of the coin to be able to become better critical thinkers of the information.
Describes seeing black men. And both of these terms are very important. Black and man. They insisted on describing the beings they saw as men, and they insisted on describing them as black. Now, they were exotic looking. At first, they thought that they were the black Zimbabwean.
So again, right here, what we're witnessing is Dr. Wesley Muhammad talking about a UFO incident that took place in Africa, just right across the pond. And the closest place to Africa, when people are asked, is it Cuba, is it Maine, or is it Brazil? It's actually Maine. Maine is the closest part. And if you see how far Maine is from Greenland, we'll start seeing what's really going on. And as we said, when the flood came in and when Atlantis existed, it was said you could walk from Africa to America, which in reality, it was all one continent. It was known as Tamari, which is where we get the ancient more for the indigenous people. But here he's talking about the children's description of what they saw. But what he's talking about is that when we hear this story, because I've heard of this story before, the context it's given is that it was gray aliens. They don't give us this side of the story or the context. Now, again, and we will see the evidence dealing with this a little more.
Groundskeepers that worked at the school. Typical black men from Zimbabwe. But then as they look closer, they were disabused of that. They weren't regular Zimbabweans. They were too exotic in their appearance. Their hair was not curly like a Zimbabwean. It was long and straight. One of the children said it was like Michael Jackson's hair. The robust features, broad nose, broad lips of the typical Zimbabwean male that these white students were familiar with, the broad nose, broad lips, these beings did not have that. To the extent that they saw the nose and mouth, they were small, they were thin. But what stood out, other than their very black skin and the black bodysuit that they wore, was the big black eyes. But they were slanted, but it's important to clarify that it was not these eyes. It was not the typical alien eye. The obsidian, the almond-shaped, purely black obsidian eyes that lack the sclera or the white of the eye, lack the iris, lack the pupil. That is not at all.
So as we're Dr. Wesley Muhammad saying, and again, this is this is Brother Rich right here. I would recommend checking out his channel, 363 Empire. Excellent YouTube, excellent information. Definitely go check out the rest of the report. Dr. Wesley Muhammad's also got a book dealing with this report, but he's telling you the report of the children, right? That what the children saw, this is what one of the children's drew. One of the things that I want to tell you is because he's getting this information, and a lot of the time people think that it's a bias or it's coming from a specific place. This information is coming from his research and dedicated investigation into this. And right here, I'm going to play you a part of it where he talks about where the reporter that actually went to go do the information on this and how he was ostracized for it. Let me see if I'll play a little bit of that real quick for you guys.
Primary, and then Dr. John Mack comes a little later. But of these first two, Tim Leach from BBC, he told the truth. He suffered the consequences for doing so. Cynthia Hine, she authored the lie that became Ariel Misremembered. So in my report, I have a section entitled The Crimes of Cynthia Hine. Ariel, further, but let's start with the first voice of Tim Leach. What he says, what I'm going to play for you after doing his initial investigation. He was floored by it. Now, this is a veteran journalist, or was, for BBC. He did war zone reporting. So he reported on the wars that broke out in Africa. He had crew members killed in these wars. So this was a hardened, in his words, a hard-ass journalist is what he was. And then he encountered the aerial UFO incident. And it messed him up mentally, and it ruined his career because he reported on the incident as it happened according to the students. Now, he's the one that reached out to Dr. John Mack, the Harvard psychologist whose name is famously attached to this incident. It was Tim Leach who called him. He needed help. Tim Leach said that this is above my pay grade. I can deal with war zones in Africa. I can't deal with this UFO thing, but there was something specific about this UFO thing that messed Tim Leach up. So he called Dr. John Mack to get help. What I'm going to play for you, for the audience, is the message that Tim Leach left on Dr. John Mack's answering machine when he made his first call to Dr. John Mack asking for help. This is the message from the answer machine. Listen closely and read the caption.
I was a realist. It was totally out of my remit. I could handle war zones, but I could not handle this UFO thing. It just didn't make sense. And that's when I had to call in extra help. Simply, I in touch with Dr. John Mack, and I got his number at Harvard University.
Image from BBC Television News in Harare, Zimbabwe. Message for Dr. John Mack. This concerns a UFO sighting over a school where a hovered landed, a black man got out, and of course, this wasn't being taken seriously despite being the BBC. Please call me as soon as you can. Thank you.
And as you can see right there, and as we've spoken on before on this channel, I mean, we can pull up the presentation. As we've spoken on the channel in the past, I believe it was on Noble Drew Ali's birthday, we can see, because they're saying, okay, a black man stepped out, right? A black man stepped out. And as we can see here, that they chose to put Negroes and other slaves, which were Native Americans and Africans, under all one category. So this is the part that becomes then interesting, correct? At the end of the day, and what we're speaking about today, and what the Dr. Wesley Muhammad's talking about, and what we're talking about the energy lines, and what's going on with the indigenous and the shamanic people in the Amazon, as well as we were seeing with the shamanic people in the areas of the Alaskan region or the Siberian circle, dealing with the Hyperbaryans as well. As we could see, they were already using a lot of this alien technology, a lot of this alien rock formations that they were finding, that as we can see, was being used to be able to harness and make tools. Now, a lot of this also becomes interesting because in one of the areas where this was taking place, it deals with an old movie talking about the Boys of Brazil, which is where there was cloning projects taking place, which then also deals with some of the stuff dealing with also Maduro, and supposedly there being a double or a doppelganger, and that's why we see so many pictures of him. Now it is also theorized that he was being replaced, and many of these different things. Again, all of it dealing with insecurity of the area, maybe the higher elite, because it all seems to have been a bit theatrical in the sense that it could all just been a Masonic change of power for them to be able to benefit in an overall plan that we're not being privy to, because at the end of the day, it doesn't make sense for the people for this to be done, but it would make sense if there's a larger plan at hand, which we have spoken on, we'll speak on in the future as well. And right here, dealing with Admiral Byrd, as we were talking about earlier, with the Greenland area, and also its connection close to what we would call the poles, and how the poles, one of the things that he spoke about was that they were, when he flew over it, he actually went in, so it would kind of led us to believe that there was a toroidal quality, or almost like what we would call a donut shape, where the ship or his airplane was able to go in through the poles. Now here we are seeing a bit of the black goo, which is again what we were talking about, which was part of what was essentially potentially being harnessed from the alien technology that's being discovered and basically being investigated and tried to be located by many military industrial complexes and governments to be able to use it for different reasons. It's also used in the way that Venom, the movie Venom, will show us, to be able to make super soldiers or create advanced forms. And this is one of the big things that we also see in what was taking place in like X-Files and different types of shows like this. So going back to our presentation and doing a quick recap, and again, we still have several other videos and other information we would like to show you guys and tell you. We've already been on maybe for, it looks like already about an hour and about 10 minutes. I don't want to keep you guys too long, but there's definitely a lot more information and a lot more to this. But we definitely wanted to put down and get some traction going on the area and the way that we're headed in talking about this subject. Now, we will talk about the geopolitics and the financial aspects, which is what our last reports were a little more on. But this episode was a little more on the exopolitics, a little bit more on the ancient mystery, dealing a little bit with mythology and legend, as that is something that we'll also get into a little more, dealing with the Hopi legends and the breaking off of the two civilizations, the ant people, and also dealing with some of the, as we were talking about, these alien indigenous beings, because that is one big thing that is also talked about, that not all aliens are essentially traveling in machines and crafts. Some aliens also use the routes of what many would say like ascended masters or avatars would use, which is using their light bodies, or even the potential of, if there's technologies that are based off of machine, then I could perceive a more harmonious based technology that would be based off of organic or biological material, that would be almost infused or married with an etheric or almost technological component that would be able to bring about the same means as a technological anti-gravity ship would. So again, that's one of the big things that we wanted to speak about today, not dealing so much with the even though we did touch on it because it is a big part of it, the geopolitical side, the resources, the wealth side, the power grab, and the theatrical side of it. And we're dealing a little bit more with the Tepuis and the indigenous people of the area, and how these sites are unique, how NASA is curious about them, and it causes many anomalies which had to be further investigated, as well as other geological and weather anomalies like the lightning that we were speaking on that takes place in Venezuela. Let's see if we can bring that up real quick for you guys, because that's definitely a good one to see real quick. En Catatumbo, la tormenta de relámpago.
In Venezuela, there's a place where the skies come alive every night. Over Lake Maracaibo, an eternal lightning storm has been raging for centuries, with up to 280 lightning strikes per hour. Known as the Catatumbo lightning, this phenomenon occurs almost 300 nights a year. Scientists believe it's caused by a unique mix of warm air, cold winds, and the surrounding mountains. But the sheer intensity of this storm is like nothing else on Earth, leaving many to wonder, could this natural light show hold even more secrets? In Venezuela, there's a place where the skies come alive.
And as we were saying, like, that's one of the interesting parts of this area, as we were talking about many of the anomalies, and we haven't even gotten to the giants and what's going on off coast, what's going on in Haiti and some of the other areas. But we wanted to touch a little bit about what's going on in the Amazon and the Arctic, and how they're connected through the anomalies that not just deal with alien, but also with ancient, indigenous, and even touching on the resource-based, you know. So as we spoke about the many different UFOs that have been recently witnessed in Venezuela and in the past as well, and not just Venezuela, but in South America, how potentially on the back end, this could be actually a bringing together of Turtle Island. So when the indigenous, more original beings of the area wake up, learn civics, claim their sovereignty, stop being subjugated, and bring about the post-millennium and creation of the government and nation their ancestors had already left for them as an inheritance for them to be able to resurrect the old ways. We touched on Greenland's resources and different bases of why they would take it, how it's playing into that role. That's why we also had the picture of the Turtle Island, of the coming together of the continent. The technocratic agenda. We already had spoken about how World War III was already being planned to be fought in the Arctic. So it's interesting how now everything's moving and gearing towards that direction. Then we also see how there's quotes already talking about in the next 5 years we'll be going to war with 7 countries, and then we end up going to war with those 7 countries. And then how we're already doubling down that we're going to take the continent. Now it could be like some would say the white hats basically taking things that are going to end up playing a role in the liberation and the benefit of humanity. But at the end of the day, it's hard for me to perceive wrong actions that bring about good, because then you're always going to have that blood in your hands or that the tainted smudge on your face. So we touched on the UFO anomalies that were in Greenland, as we saw the video with Harold Kaltzvela talking about the black goo and how that's something that's usually found and one of the areas found near crash sites, but specifically also been talked about being found in Greenland, and as well in the UFOs using some of this stuff, and how that crash is millions of years old. And that's basically the synopsis of what we're speaking on today. I'm glad you guys were able to tune in. Like I said, there was a lot more to report on, but we'll be coming with you guys on another transition probably Saturday. I'm sure something will happen between here and there, seeing how they're very eager to show you everything that's going on and what's going on. So you won't be out of the circle very far, but a big part of it is not just being in the circle, but also knowing what approaches and what steps to take, which we'll speak on here in future events. One of the big ones is staying informed. So we're glad you guys tuned in today so that we can inform you a little more on what's really going on with the Arctic and the Amazon, and why we're so vested in pushing and doubling down to go into these areas and take the leaders, and no matter what the leaders say. But then this is also part of a larger chess game that's taking place in the world, dealing with plans and another report tying into all these things. So we want to thank you again for tuning in, and staying tuned here with us at Rio Grande Current News, bringing you some of the information dealing with geopolitics, exopolitics, ancient technologies, ancient indigenous peoples, and many other things. So stay tuned with us as we keep bringing you reports, and stay great, and I hear you out there.